Okay, thank you for your patience. My name is Soraya Murray, and I am an assistant professor in film and digital media at UC Santa Cruz. I'll keep the bios short since we're running a little bit behind. Our first esteemed guest is Jordan Mechner, who began his career as a video game creator in the 80s with Karateka and Prince of Persia, two of the first games to combine arcade action with realistic animation and cinematic storytelling. He wrote the screenplay for the recent Prince of Persia film as well. Please join me in welcoming Jordan Mechner.
Hi, thanks for your patience. I can't see my slides here, so I'm kind of going to be winging it here. I'm going to take you through 20 years in about 15 minutes. I'm going to start with the PC version of Prince of Persia in 1990. Okay, so this is a game that was inspired by movies, and by a particular kind of action-adventure movie in particular. And the story of how it came into being started 5 years earlier on the Apple II. This is the computer that I took with me to college. It wasn't possible to study game making yet, so I was making games instead of studying and going to classes. And these were some of the games that I was playing and enjoying. Lode Runner and the Castles of Dr. Creep, both published by Broderbund. They were modular puzzle games, which you could sort of recombine the elements to create a lot of different kinds of levels. And I wanted to make a game like that. Another inspiration was my own game, Karateka, which I'd done junior year in college. And this had a sort of a cinematic storytelling presentation. Karateka had a very simple story where you just had to run from left to right and fight everybody you met along the way to rescue the princess from the evil warlord. There he is. So I wanted to combine sort of the cinematic Karateka type game with the modular Lode Runner type game. That was basically my high concept for Prince of Persia. Another inspiration was the Arabian Nights, the tales that I'd read as a kid in storybooks and also seen in movies. This is the silent film version, Douglas Fairbanks. And so the 1001 Nights is really a deep well of stories, characters, archetypes, and I thought this would translate well to the Apple II screen, where graphics had to be very simple. I thought a lot about silent film too, because I felt that games, like film at the turn of the previous century, were a new medium where we were still sort of figuring out the vocabulary and what could be done, what this medium was capable of. For the animation, I adopted a technique that goes all the way back to Muybridge, 100 years earlier. Rotoscoping, basically taking still images from film and flipbooking it to create the illusion of motion. So I videotaped my own motion capture footage. This is my brother in the parking lot across the street from our high school. So I videotaped him running, jumping, doing all the movements that I thought the character might need to do in the game. And then set about trying to get these images into the computer. This was a pretty laborious process at the time, involving black and white magic marker, whiteout, a Xerox machine, and this was the result. So this was the first step. I started by getting a character up and running on the screen, and then I started building the game around it. This was a process that took about 3 years. This is the office where I was doing it, just north of here in San Rafael. And I built a modular environment for the character to run and play around in. Now, at a certain point, my friend Tommy Pierce convinced me that my game needed fighting in it, or it wouldn't be fun. So I tried to shoot some reference footage. That's me using my high school fencing prowess. But I thought that footage lacked something. It didn't quite have the cinematic excitement that I was going for. So I went back to the cinematic roots and once again turned to one of my favorite adventure movies. This is Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone in Robin Hood. This sequence, by luck, was purely in profile and let me steal the frames that I needed to go through my handcrafted rotoscoping process and recreate it in the game. So there you have it, a game inspired by movies. Did one more motion reference shot. That's my producer, Brian Euler, in the glamorous office where we just spent 3 years making the game. And this gave us our happy ending sequence. Now, the release of the game was a not-so-happy beginning. During the time I'd been making the game, the Apple II market had been dwindling, and now in 1989, when it shipped, the market was pretty much dead. And although we spent a year making a PC version, which you saw at the beginning, and versions for the Amiga as well, none of them sold. So at the end of the first year, Prince of Persia had sold 10,000 copies, and major chains had actually called it back because it wasn't selling. So it looked like this was all it was ever going to do, which was, it was a little disappointing to me because my first game, Karateka, had done a lot better. So, I thought I'd just spend 4 years making a game that it got great reviews and people liked it, but it seemed like not many people were ever going to hear about it. But then we were saved by a combination of things. The Mac version was finally done 2 years late. But that was actually great timing because now in 1992 there was a Mac market with color screens, and not very many games available. So Prince of Persia suddenly became really popular on the Mac. And then overseas, versions for all different kinds of consoles, gaming systems, you see a few of them here, in systems that I'd never seen, ported by teams that I never met, all sort of released at the same time, and finally made Prince of Persia 2 years after its initial release a success. It ended up selling 2 million copies across all platforms. Today, I don't know if you'd get a second chance like that. I think it's pretty unlikely. So over the next few years, I designed a sequel, The Shadow and the Flame, that came out in '93. And then I stepped away from Prince of Persia, and I spent 4 years making a sort of a more overtly cinematic, story-based adventure game called The Last Express. And the publisher, Broderbund, went on to make a 3D version of Prince of Persia, which didn't do very well. So 10 years after its release, it seemed that Prince of Persia had its success, run its course, and the franchise was pretty much as dead as it could be. I figured it had a good 10-year run, and that was it. And then Ubisoft, a French company with a studio in Montreal, approached me with the idea of doing a new Prince of Persia game for the new generation of consoles. And these are some of the early tests that the team did to show the possibilities and try to explore how we could do a version of Prince of Persia that, that would go beyond, the first 3D Prince of Persia game. And really, I think the key idea that got everybody excited about this was taking the gameplay vertical and using parkour so that what had previously been, sort of a 2D running and jumping game now really used the 3D space. This is the team in Montreal that I worked with to make Sands of Time. As you can see, it's much bigger team than the first Prince of Persia game had. And the story that we came up with on the theme of time and manipulating time included an hourglass and a nod to the first game, but in a sort of a different way. I'm going to play you a trailer that tells the story of that, the Sands of Time.
A king and his son have defeated a mighty empire, inheriting an extravagant hourglass and a mysterious dagger that contain the mystical powers of the Sands of Time.
Inside the hourglass is a marvel that no living man has seen. Only the dagger can unlock the Sands of Time, and it belongs to a greater one than I.
But when the prince is tricked into releasing an ancient and evil curse,
You have unleashed the Sands of Time. I can undo what you have done. Give me the dagger.
he'll have to put his faith in a woman he has no reason to trust.
My father's army sacked your palace, captured you as a slave. You have every reason to hate me. Now you want me to trust you.
Go on! There's no time! The dagger! You must not get the dagger!
Now he must use his power to control time, to get the sands back. The power of revival. The power of delay. The power of restraint. The power of haste. The power of destiny. From Ubisoft Studios comes the epic tale of a prince searching for redemption and the kingdom he must save. Prince of Persia, the Sands of Time.
So the Sands of Time shipped in 2003, and it was really well received. It was a great project. I loved doing it, and it really brought the franchise back from the dead. And I now set about my next project, which was trying to get a movie of Prince of Persia made. And backing up, I'd always been interested in film. Back in the Prince of Persia Apple II days, I had spent some time making 16mm student films, written a bunch of screenplays that had never gotten produced, and made some short documentaries. And this experience helped as I went to LA and set about trying to pitch this project to studios. Adapting the story of the game into a movie was actually required creating a whole new story, because the story of the game Sands of Time was really a story that was tailored to be played. It was all oriented around the things that you could do with the controller. You've got buttons for jumping over your enemies, fighting them with swords, running on walls and things like that. There's no buttons for talking to people or making friends with them or anything like that. That's part of the reason that in the game story we opted to turn everybody into monsters in the first 15 minutes of the story. That way you have a convenient reason for why the hero, who is supposed to be a nice guy, just tries to kill everybody he meets. It's because they're all monsters who are trying to kill him first. In a movie, that kind of story constraint is unnecessarily limiting. So I came up with a new story, which I pitched with John August to Jerry Bruckheimer, who liked it, and spent the next year writing the first draft and revisions of the first draft of the movie. That screenplay, if you're interested, you can still read it on my website. The development process of the script actually then moved on for several years with other writers, while Ubisoft went on and produced several more Prince of Persia games, 3 of them here. Meanwhile, I had a chance to do a Prince of Persia graphic novel, that's another medium like film, like games, which I'd loved since I was a kid. And I didn't write this one. I worked with a company called First Second Books in New York. And that was a great experience. And doing that sort of whetted my appetite for doing graphic novels myself. And I ended up undertaking another project with Owen Pham and Alex Pouveland, the artists who illustrated this, which I'll tell you about in a moment. But anyway, the movie finally got a director and a cast and went into production in Morocco in 2008. That film shoot was a lot of fun. It was, to go from the 8-bit Apple II screen and beeps and buzzes to, the cast of thousands with horses and camels in these incredible, spectacular desert locations was quite an experience. Here's the movie trailer.
Have you wondered how you could have found such a treasure? The gods have a plan for you, a destiny.
I've seen its power with my own eyes. Releasing the sand turns back time. Only the holder of the dagger is aware of what's happened.
How did you do that?
Only the dagger can unlock the sands of time. And there are those who would use this power to destroy the world.
Time will erase everything.
The only way to stop this Armageddon is for us to take the dagger to the secret Guardian Temple. We must take it there, Dastan.
You really enjoy telling me what to do, don't you?
Only because you're so good at following orders.
Yeah, don't press your luck.
Assassins.
They strike terror into the heart of all they cross.
Such a noble prince. Leaping to assist the fallen beauty.
Who said you were a beauty?
There must be a reason why you can't take your eyes off me.
Fight him!
The High Temple. It's guarded by some sort of demon. Dastan, where's the dagger?
You're welcome to search me for it. You'll have to be very thorough.
It's time.
We have to get out of here.
So a movie inspired by video games, inspired by movies. And the movie came out last year. There was a whole slew of merchandising as well, books, Legos, toys. And one particular project that I got deeply involved in and wrote myself was a new Prince of Persia graphic novel, a prequel to the movie, which I did with 6 great artists. That was a lot of fun. And I've stayed involved with graphic novels as well. It's Owen Pham and Alex Pouveland and I collaborated on a book about the Knights Templar, Solomon's Thieves, which the first book came out last year, and the volumes 2 and 3 are on the way. And then on the screenwriting side, one of the projects I've done is to adapt a graphic novel by the late, great Michael Turner called Fathom, with Megan Fox playing Aspen Matthews. And that's the first time that I adapted something as a screenwriter, which I hadn't first created as a video game. It's something that was created by someone else, and so that was a fun and interesting project. Finally, to complete the circle, the original Prince of Persia was re-released on the same day as the movie on the iPhone. And that's 20 years and 15, 20 minutes. Thanks for listening, and if you have questions, we're going to do the panel afterwards.